This podcast is brought to you by Adelaide. Media verification and measurement are undergoing major disruption. Legacy players are pivoting to performance advertising, AI is reshaping brand safety, and attention is replacing viewability. Adelaide is leading this shift with AU, a new way to assess media quality that scores placements based on their potential to drive attention and outcomes before your ads run. Think of it like a credit score for media. Finally, a clear view of quality before you buy. Take the guesswork out of your investment strategy and try Adelaide AU on your next campaign. This podcast is brought to you by AudioHook, the leading independent audio DSP. AudioHook has direct publisher integrations into all major podcast and streaming radio platforms, providing 40% more inventory than what could be accessed in omnichannel DSPs. What's more, AudioBook has full transcripts on more than 90% of all podcast inventory, enabling advanced contextual targeting and brand suitability. AudioHook is so confident that in addition to CPM buys, they offer the industry's only pay-for-performance option where brands can scale audio and podcasting with peace of mind knowing they are only paying for outcomes. Visit audiohook.com to learn more. That's audiohook.com. Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm joined by Eric Franchi, and our guest this week is Todd Braverman, the CRO of Ampersand. I wanted to have Ampersand on here because it's an interesting company in the TV space. A lot of people don't understand it and its position. I really want to understand how they're evolving as TV goes to streaming, because their history is really with these MVPDs and who actually own the company. Eric, have you done much research or talked to the Ampersand people in the past?
I've known of the business. They were previously called NCC, I believe.
Yeah, NCC, which stood for like National Cable Company or something like that.
Yeah, definitely a name that needed a bit of modernization. So shout out to the team that renamed it to the Ampersand. This is an interesting business and very like something you'd see in TV, where it is a new business with a specific use case, but it's owned by all of the big boys and girls.
And they went through this massive transformation under the leadership of Nicole Pangus, who was the CEO there and left recently to join Netflix, but she really gave them a new identity, new office, new reason for being. So it'd be really interesting to catch up with Todd to find out about that. So big news this week. I had big news. So if you've been living under a rock, you may not know, I wrote a book. It's called Yield: How Google Bought, Built, and Bullied Its Way to Advertising Dominance. And it is available for pre-order on Amazon and other places you may buy books. And it will be available in actual order shipping August 5th. I'll also like to say, if you want to buy at a pre-order, which I really would appreciate, your best bet is to go to my website, aripaparo.com, and follow the links there. Because it's in pre-order, for some reason, it's very hard to find when you just go to Amazon and search for it. Hopefully that'll get better over time, but I've heard this is a very normal thing. So aripaparo.com has links to buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other places, and that's the way to go. Have you placed your order yet, Eric?
I think I was one of the first to place the order. Come on, man.
All right. Good to hear.
I announced my pre-order publicly. I'm super excited for this. I've gone back from Kindle to reading physical books.
Okay.
Just something about like the physical book makes it easier for me to read and dive into. So I'm looking forward to the hardcover, and hopefully you autograph it for me.
I will.
Can I ask you some questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. How does one former founder, now podcaster and media magnate, become an author? Like, where did this come from? What's the story?
Yeah, so this has been a bucket list thing for a long time. I've had a couple of aborted attempts where I've outlined a book and thought about it, but it's never really going to happen. I was working on a book that was written entirely in emoji, and that seemed like a bad idea. I have the first chapter of that if someone wants to get my emoji book. But, you know, it's really about what did I want to write about? And I had toyed with this idea of writing the history of ad tech, but I thought, like, who cares, right? Like, it's not a story. It's just like an industry. It's like a textbook. And then the experience of covering the Google trial last fall, where I was in the pews listening to the testimony for 3 weeks, really sparked this idea, because the story, it was to some extent the history of ad tech, but it was it was a people story. It was Steph Laser getting gaslit by her Google reps. It was Tim from OpenX firing 300 employees because Google changed the algorithm in DV360. It was, Neil Mohan shepherding through a brand new strategy at Google and sort of changing the display world forever. And I had access to these people. I had access to the story, and I had access to thousands of pages of internal emails from Google. And I was able to come up with an outline and start filling it in pretty rapidly. And I'm not going to say my book's good because I don't know if my book's good. You'll have to judge. But it's a good story, and I did my best to tell it.
What is it like pitching a book? Like, how do you get a book deal?
The good thing about this story is that it's very topical. So it's in the news right now. What's going to happen? We talked about it in this podcast later on. But what is going to happen to not just Google and its ad tech assets, but also to journalism and media is a subject that obviously I care about because I talk about it all the time and also is in the news. So I think that there's a lot of interest in the story. And it also has the advantage of being an undertold story because so much of the press is focused on the Google search case with Chrome spin out, because that frankly is just more consumer impact. Consumers are going to really notice if Chrome ends up being owned by somebody else or if Apple products don't have default search. I get it. That's a bigger story. But this story is also big and really important, and no one's telling it.
Final question, scale of 1 to 5 in terms of difficulty level of writing a book and just this whole process versus, I don't know, building a couple of companies, building products. Like, how hard is it?
5. It
5.
is.
Wow.
It is hard. I mean, it's leaning into a skill I have. I can write. So it didn't come unnaturally to me. It came quite naturally to me, but it was an intense amount of work to not just get the story, to make it interesting, to make it consistent and readable, to fact check. There's like 30 pages of footnotes in this document. I didn't want to get sued. Like every single fact in there comes from somewhere, not from just from my head. And then, geez, doing the audiobook. There's an audiobook that's coming out. You can't order it yet, but you will be able to in the next month. And I recorded that myself on the same microphone we're using now. And that was hard.
That's got to be what, 8 hours?
More. It's like they limit you to 2-hour sessions because you get burnout reading. I think it was probably like 16 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We have to have another podcast about this. This is like,
all right.
We're already long. And I want to talk I want to talk to Todd, but this is awesome. We need to talk more about this. Congrats, man. I can't be more excited.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. And everyone, I would appreciate a pre-order. Go to aripaparo.com and pre-order it. I will sign any physical book that you find me with if you give me a pen, but you got to order it first. All right, let's dive in with Todd Braverman from Ampersand. All right, and welcome Todd Braverman, the CRO of Ampersand. Todd, thank you for being here.
Appreciate you guys having me.
So Ampersand, I would guess we have a 50% hit rate on the listeners of the show to like really understanding what Ampersand is. Do you think it's 50, or what would be your guess?
I'm hoping it's more than 50, but I think that's a good start right now.
All right, so for the 50 who think that Ampersand is just like a character on the keyboard, what is this thing?
So Ampersand was rebranded about 3 years ago. It was NCC, and I think actually people probably recognize those 3 letters more than Ampersand. But the team has done a great job of branding Ampersand in the marketplace. I am 1 month in right now, but in essence, what Ampersand is it's a joint venture between Comcast, Charter, and Cox, really unifying all 3 of those companies' premium TV and streaming ad inventory. We also have 2 other MVPDs, Altice and Verizon, which we have access to their inventory as well. And ultimately, it is the ability to reach close to 63 million households to enable planning, targeting, and measurement of audience-driven television campaigns. And we represent over 118 million multi-screen households. So we solve for a lot of issues in the marketplace.
Okay, right. So you're a linear ad network, for lack of a better phrase. Maybe that's a little offensive to call you an ad network, but it seems like it's a linear ad network. Why would someone buy ads from Ampersand instead of calling up their friendly Comcast rep or their NBC rep or anyone like that?
Well, Ampersand, not necessarily an ad network, but an aggregator of inventory. So what we're able to do is we're able to eliminate fragmentation by providing advertisers with a single access point to the multi-screen inventory. So yes, linear cable is a big part of it, but also is the streaming aspect of it. The ability to use Comcast streaming as well as Charter and Spectrum streaming as well.
Okay, yeah, we want to talk about your transition from linear to streaming. What was the original idea behind NCC? Because it was, if I remember correctly, and tell me if I'm wrong, you were taking the inventory that the cable companies had from the broadcasters, the 2 minutes per hour, and then like aggregating it for the times when the cable companies weren't selling it to their local advertisers. Is that a good summary of where it came from?
Yeah, and I think the biggest misperception of what it is Ampersand is absolutely not a reseller. And it's an important distinction that we do like to make to our clients and in the marketplace. We are owned, like I said, by Comcast, Charter, and Cox, and we have representation deals with Verizon and Altice, but we don't buy the inventory from those inventories and resell it. We simply sell that inventory that they have within their supply, which does historically equal that 2 minutes an hour.
Okay, cool. Now, the 2 minutes per hour and the linear stuff all is like yesterday's news, and to some extent. And the move to streaming changes that a lot. Different people have those 2 minutes per hour, and also the ways of buying are different. So, how did the company make the transition, and how is it currently making the transition into the streaming and with streaming the data-driven world?
Yeah, look, I mean, Ampersand is a company, to your point, that was rooted in linear, but we are embracing both worlds, both that linear side as well as the streaming side. We are pushing a multi-screen mindset, efforts to reduce fragmentation by unifying the streaming and traditional television under one platform is really what our value prop is to the marketplace, because it allows them to enable holistic campaigns across both linear and the streaming side of the house.
Okay, well, can you give us an example? Like, what does that mean? Like, could I buy a segment of that is based entirely on audience, and how does it work where some of it is denominated by a currency like Nielsen and others is denominated by currencies that are more user-centric?
Look, we look at it as delivering audiences. So whether that's Nielsen or any other type of measurement company, like ultimately on the addressability side, we want to reach audiences. And because the data that we have from our owners, like, and just one thing to clarify is like we utilize data insights that is generated from our owners' data. We don't actually touch or hold the subscriber data, but we know that there's an authentication process, whether it's utilizing Spectrum's, TV Live app or Comcast app, but also the linear side. So we are trying to deduplicate and minimize the frequency, or make sure that we don't have frequency going through the roof, by making sure that we can reach both folks on linear and streaming.
So you have the data from your owners, but you said you don't have it. You use it, but you don't have it. Can you parse that for us?
Yeah, so because we are representing that data, we do not own the data. They own the data, and we don't touch it, and we don't hold it. We literally, when we're doing things, we can do the match rates, but ultimately it is Comcast data, it is Cox data, and it is Charter's data.
Okay. What sort of data? Like what are people using data for in the TV world?
And so the data overlays that we're getting from our owners is obviously, like name, email, because they're authenticating the owners, Cox, Charter, and Comcast. They know exactly who that person is. So then we can measure and say, hey, here's the ad exposure to X, to then measure on beyond.
Okay, so I can come to you as a agency or an advertiser with a data source, whatever it is, and match it is this a part of BlockGraph or BlockThrough, whichever one is owned by Comcast?
Yep, BlockGraph is one of the ways that we do that as well, yes.
All right, yeah, so BlockGraph, we had an interview a while back on Marketecture somewhere on our website. BlockThrough is a totally different company, but I confused them. Okay, so it's sort of like a clean room-ish kind of solution.
And we partner with clean rooms as well to put things in there as well.
When you think about TV, a lot of it is about distribution, and the cable companies, your owners, were the traditional way to distribute. Obviously, you could go over the air too. And in the new world, there are physical devices and OEMs that are distributing, Roku, Amazon, Samsung, LG, et cetera, et cetera. How does that affect your business, and how do you think internally about that transition?
Yeah, it's this multi-screen reaching audiences wherever they are. I think that's the biggest thing that's happened over, the last 5-10 years is how do we reach audiences? Because to your point, the traditional television ecosystem is declining. And while we have tremendous scale compared to our competitive set being in 63 million homes right now, I think advertisers want to reach audiences, and they're not as concerned of how they reach that audience. Do they reach them via a platform? Do they reach them via television? Do they reach them via streaming, whatever it may be? And we're trying to be able to serve that need across the marketplace.
Yeah. And how do you see the world evolving with so many new competitors? So, on this podcast, we've talked a lot about the SMB market because both Eric and I are invested in companies in that space. So Mountain TV Scientific, Vibe, and now NBC, one of your owners, has Universal Ads, which is doing that. How do you see, like, if you were to build a picture for us of the market landscape, how do you see those companies fitting in or not fitting in with what you do and other kind of ways in which advertising gets into this channel?
For what we stand for and what Ampersand is and what our owners are, like, it's not just the major holding companies that we're talking to. Yes, that makes up a big part of our business, but it is also, small, medium-sized businesses. I was having breakfast with somebody this morning, and ultimately, like, they're trying to solve for how do they reach those folks who are spending $1,000 a month on their car wash, whatever it may be. So I think there's a need for everybody. I don't think this is a zero-sum game where, yes, there will be winners and there will be losers, but ultimately, I think anybody who can support the opportunity or the ability to help marketers connect with their consumers is going to be successful in the long run.
To me, as someone who's not a real TV guy, it feels as though there's a lot of different companies that have really similar pitches, if not reality, on this. Like if you asked someone from Comcast's Effective Group, which is their traditional, it used to be called Spotlight. It's the group that sells to ads to local folks. And you ask them what they do, I bet they would say something like, we help TV advertisers find audiences across a great deal of reach. So like, help us out, man. Like, tell us where do we segment? How does it all fit together?
Comcast Advertising, new name for those folks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, look, I think there's different parts within these organizations that are going to serve different folks. Do ultimately we get to a self-serve world? Like that's an opportunity, for the long tail and those smaller folks. But yes, look, everybody's got the pitch because linear has historically had the scale, has had the mass reach, and it was an effective, efficient way to reach audiences. Now with the ability to layer on data and be more targeted in what they do, gives them, a little bit more return on their ad spend.
Okay, so I've been giving you a hard time here for the audience listening. How many days have you been in the job?
Workday's 21, but we're here less than a month officially on the calendar.
Okay, so give us your perspective on coming in here. Like, what brought you to the job? What are the surprises you found, and what are the biggest opportunities?
It was not something that I was actively looking for. It was an opportunity that was brought to me, and definitely did my diligence before I jumped right in. And look, I think the differentiator truly is the data that we have access to. And I think that is unparalleled in the marketplace. Yes, we are not sitting in a walled garden, but to me, it was all about the people. The people at Ampersand are unbelievable. Our owners are fantastic. I mean, you look at the folks who are running those businesses. They are smart, innovative folks. And to me, that's what this was all about. Like, am I going to go somewhere where is going to have the ability to grow and to bring value to the marketplace? And I think Ampersand will allow us to do that for marketers and really get out there to bring some, function to some dysfunction that exists out there.
Right. Surprises?
Surprises is I can't just go do a deal anymore like I used to do at my days at Turner in Warner Media. I gotta go, do the deal with the clients, and then I got to make sure that the owners are okay with that. But that's been the biggest one. So you negotiate with the client, then I got to turn my chair around and negotiate with the owners. But
that's interesting.
Everybody's been amazing partners, and I think that is been the biggest thing. And I think going back to one of your earlier questions, another surprise was and we're gonna do a big push on this is just people truly understanding what Ampersand is. Like, we are not taking a margin on Comcast, Charter, and Cox's inventory and marking it up and reselling it. We are literally, just representing their inventory and selling it at the marketplace, just at a larger scale with less fragmentation.
Yeah, I think that comes home when you talk about that swivel chair approval thing. How do you deal with sales conflict? Same account, two different sales teams.
Yeah, it's definitely something that, in my first 30 days I've spent a lot of time talking about. And, Comcast has value and metrics and things that they not value and metrics, but they have opportunities that they bring to the marketplace that are unique just to Comcast. What Ampersand is doing is taking things that live across all three of our owners and our two other MVPDs and going to market as one. So, if Comcast is in the marketplace selling, pause ads that are unique just to Comcast, that's what their client, that's what their team goes out and that's what they sell. If they're in the hyper local marketplace selling to Bob's Car Wash, that's what they go out to sell. But as it relates to all three owners and the inventory that sits across it and the data that sits across it, that is something that Ampersand is really in the marketplace doing.
Is there a future where Ampersand reps Roku inventory or LG's inventory or another one of those folks?
I think, we would need approval from the board, and I think ultimately everything is up for grabs. I don't think that is so far-fetched.
It isn't. It doesn't seem far-fetched because they would bring to the same table the same assets, the data, and the need for scale and national representation in a sense.
Yeah, ultimately, it's a question for the owners, since, we are, to your point, we are repping their inventory. So if they decide, hey, let's go bring in another owner and another partner, then, that's something that, that they will decide absolutely, ultimately.
I'm sure that deal would be very easy to get through the lawyers in Philadelphia.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Have you been in Philadelphia much?
Historically, yes, I have not spent much time in Philadelphia in my first 30 days here with the upfront, obviously, right around the corner. I've been spending a tremendous amount of time just understanding, what we're doing there and how we can bring value to our agency partners for the next, month or two. Obviously going to Cannes in a week to talk to some of our partners there. And then we'll dive in Philadelphia and across all of our markets across the country.
What's your go-to Wawa order?
So I love Wawa. My children never knew about Wawa. We were in a soccer tournament and I'm like, we're going to Wawa. And they're like, we're going to a gas station? I'm like, no. Wawa is not a gas station. So we went there and I think my one son got a smoothie. The other one got a sandwich. Then you got the Wawa right in front of you right now. So yes, I am a big fan of Wawa. I grew up in South Florida where Wawas did not exist. And as I made my way up the Northeast with a stop in Virginia in between, I learned all about Wawa.
It's really the best part of that region of the world. Eric, I've been dominating this conversation. Do you want to dive in here a little bit?
Todd, we're in a segment into news in a little bit. It's been just an incredible year of developments around AI, and with things that are coming down the pipe from Google with VO3 from an ad creation standpoint, and just the ability to utilize AI across everything from like planning to optimization. How are you guys thinking about AI just because, TV ends up being such a real fertile ground to either be disrupted or evolve?
Yeah, I think you break it down into 5 categories, if you will, of kind of how, I won't say how we use AI, but how we plan to use AI. First one, optimizing media sales. AI definitely will accelerate strategy and collateral creation, which is obviously going to help us with revenue forecasting. So that's one. Process. This is the easy one, not easy, but this is the one that a lot of people are talking about, from process automation, helping workflows, help reduce repetitive manual tasks. This exists everywhere. In my previous company, the amount of things that were done manually was unbelievable. The big one, accelerate product innovation. AI engines are going to help write better requirements. So whether that's user stories, help write better code faster, all of those types of things. Analytics support, and then, kind of that natural language processing for insights. Just the ability to analyze strategy, goals, presentations to actually provide actionable insights. Like, that's our plan. Are we fully in on all of those? Not to the extent we know we will be in the future, but that's definitely how Ampersand is going to, plan to use that moving forward.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So, it sounds like phase 1 for Ampersand, unlike, or like a lot of companies, is using AI to augment and improve like internal operations.
Absolutely. I think that's the first step. And then ultimately we do deterministic down the road, and, ultimately how AI fits into how we utilize the data insights that is generated from the owners, like that'll be very interesting down the road.
The AI must hate your company name. It must confuse the prompt so much. Might as well name your company M-Dash and see what happens.
I think when they were trademarking Ampersand, I don't think they were thinking about how AI was going to how AI was going to recognize that. But yes, you're very true.
All right, well let's take a break and come back for the refresh news of the week. Todd Braverman, the new CRO of Ampersand. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And one last thing, I do want to congratulate on the launch of the book. Very exciting. Can't wait to get my hands on it and get a copy and read it.
Appreciate that. There will be no lack of book promos on this podcast, so I think the listeners will get used to that.
I'm glad I can contribute to that.
You might be the first.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
All right, we're back, everybody, with the refresh, the news of the week. I don't know where to begin. There is so much AI stuff happening that is like, it would be the biggest news of every week, and it all happened this week. So let's just take it from the top. We'll cover as much as we can. So I think it was Monday, there was an article in the Journal about Meta effectively saying that there is now a timeline towards them going all in on AI-generated ad campaigns. So right now, Meta, I think, is one of the leading companies using AI for their sort of like ad creation and ad optimization. One of the things that they do now is they will tape an ad and use generative AI and make some changes. What they're basically putting a stake in the ground on is in 2026, and maybe even by the end of this year, this vision of a brand taking a product image, maybe their website, giving a budget, and then Facebook or Instagram basically doing everything else. So automatically generating ads, finding the right people to target, personalizing it in real time based on like location, right? So winter in New York, you got a car in the snow. Winter in LA, you got a car driving through the coastline. Basically the vision that everybody's been thinking about how an end-to-end AI-driven ad delivery might look like. Meta is saying that end of 2026 is the time frame for it. I didn't think this was that big of a story because Doug has been talking about this for some time, and they've got over 1 million customers using AI. But people went crazy over this. Why did everybody go crazy about this, Ari?
Well, I think the big tech companies have had this as their North Star for 10, 15 years. There was, and I've said this on this pod before, which is Google got into a lot of trouble for saying this too early. They said this in like the 2010 timeframe and everyone freaked out. But this feels like it's real, and Zuck is very ambitious, and he seems like he's got the goods, and maybe it's possible. I think that you always have to listen to what these big tech companies say and then ask yourself, what segment of the advertiser world are they really talking about? And I think it's almost always the case that they're talking about, very direct response, mostly online advertisers for whom this might be the case. And the ability to do something like this for like a top 500, traditional advertisers probably, even if it was possible, they wouldn't want it. So I think this could be a big step forward. It's the natural step forward. Like you would expect this. It's just like PMax or Advantage Plus or Max Plus, whatever, all these things taken to the next logical step.
Let me press on that, and we'll ask Todd. Do you think that a top 500 customer that has performance goals would not want to, just say, hey, all right, here's the asset, here's a budget, here is a CPA to optimize towards, and here's my bank account? You don't think that would appeal to basically any marketer?
I think the tooling would be significantly different. So I'm not going to say it will never happen or that it's not an interesting thing to think about, but the controls and tooling is different. And we've already seen this. Like if you ask the traditional advertisers about their opinion about PMax and other things like that, they always talk about the lack of control and transparency, and that doesn't change. Just because the AI is even better doesn't make the demands for transparency and control in media more important. Similarly, in creative, a e-com advertiser might be totally fine just giving them the homepage and letting the ad and the product feeds and letting the ads come out, whereas an auto advertiser is not going to be okay with that at all. But there could be some middle ground. There could be a world where, the brand's assets remain unchanged, but the pricing and the offer and the coupon language is automated. So it gets complicated. And I hate to be Debbie Downer here. I'm a big technologist, but the reality is that there are the tooling, workflow, and controls required for the top 500 advertisers are significant.
Todd, what's your view on this? Because presumably this is your world, right? Top 500 advertisers, big brands.
Yep. I think it's going to be category specific. To Ari's point, like a pharma, never going to happen. I mean, there's just too many regulations behind that, from, government regulations, gambling, same thing probably with the regulation that exists there. who's going to be that CMO and CEO that says, hey, let's take a shot here. I think, there's going to need to be checks and balances on the back end. And, I think what, Meta talked about doesn't necessarily allow for that. I think it's like, hey, give us a product, we make it, we run it, we bill it, and we're done. I think it's going to take a bold CMO. And are we a year away from that? Who knows? But I think it'll be category specific. And I think certain categories may lean in and others definitely will not.
Yeah. Let's not forget that the bulk of Meta's customer base is SMBs from a revenue and total customer perspective. So I understand why he's, emphasizing this so much, but like the personalization to do that at scale, even, using examples of like highly regulated industries, that is the perfect use case for AI. So I can't imagine that, it's not embraced in some large capacity. Like I'm definitely on the other side of this, in that, like, I think that AI and these types of capabilities will permeate every category up to the largest brands.
Oh, it'll take time. It'll be different, and it'll take time.
So big news number 2 was New York Times and Amazon signed an AI licensing agreement. I don't know if you were surprised about this one or not surprised about this one, because when it comes to AI, New York Times has been in the news from a lawsuit perspective. So They sued OpenAI, they sued Microsoft. They had a very aggressive stance about using their catalog, using their media to feed the LLMs. So this is a pretty big deal that they're signing a licensing agreement. I think it's very interesting that they were doing it with Amazon. Because if we think about the LLMs that we all go to and that champion the deals with the publishers, Amazon has been nowhere. So this is a licensing deal that includes news, cooking, and The Athletic. And, I would presume that Amazon is cutting a relatively big check for this thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say first, the lawsuits have always been sort of the first step towards getting just a larger check.
Yes.
I don't think the New York Times has ever said it was off limits. They would never license. They just wanted to get paid. So Amazon paying them is good news for everybody. Secondly, it does feel as though there might be a little bit of a category difference here, where especially the fact they mentioned cooking and The Athletic, in that content is very commerce centric. It's no skin off New York Times' back if people buy a product more readily on Amazon because of their content, whereas creating sort of a search engine that doesn't means you don't have to visit the NewYorkTimes.com is much closer to their core and maybe a little bit more of a threat.
Yeah, that makes sense. The thing I noted here, just connecting some dots, and maybe to your point, Ari, this is like a single use case that makes a lot of sense for Amazon, right? Like, to the extent that Alexa is in the kitchen and fueling ideas around cooking, having access to cooking makes a lot of sense. Amazon is making moves that are, kind of under the radar, right? Like they had those 2 big acqui-hires, like 9-figure acqui-hires that were like kind of complex M&A last year with Adept and Covariant. They have the big investment in Anthropic. So it's like they're out there building something, but being relatively under the radar and not having a lot of big announcements, which I think is kind of cool and worth keeping an eye on.
We might have to just accept that they're smarter than the rest of us.
Absolutely. So Digiday had a must read, a leaked Amazon DSP sales presentation this week. So we'll link to it in the newsletter next week. But I grabbed a screenshot of maybe the most interesting slide here, where Amazon has been aggressively looking to compete on price for its DSP. And they've got a slide here that basically calls it out with a DSP fee of 1%. Versus an industry standard fee of 4%, they're saying we're 75% less expensive.
Yeah, it's your margins, our opportunity hits the trade desk next. To be clear, this 1% fee appears to be only for programmatic guaranteed, and this is a long expected situation where in the programmatic guaranteed workflow, the DSP really doesn't do anything. The DSP just responds yes to every bid request, and there's been a lot of feeling among buyers that it's paying the full DSP fee doesn't make sense, and many DSPs on their rate card don't clearly differentiate. So you have to kind of negotiate already with the DSP to get that 4% fee, and 4% is too much. It should be an ad serving fee, which, if you just call up Mediaocean and ask for an ad serving fee, it's not charged as a percentage of media. It's in the cents. And if you're a video $10, $20 CPM, you can do the math. It turns out to be, maybe it's 1%, 2%, things like that. So this is a shot across the bow, but it's also a fat target. It's an area where the DSPs effectively are overcharging.
Yeah, agreed. What about the rest of it? Like just, more broad DSP use cases. They're competing, like, I think very aggressively there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Amazon's DSP group is making the transition over a couple of years from being an extension of their retail media business, where most of the customers were also selling products on Amazon, to a full-throated competitor to the trade desk. They want to win the open web as a DSP. They have the talent who's been on the show, people like Brian Tomasetti and Neil Richter. They have the money. They have the data. And I think we all think DV360 is maybe not Google's top priority. So one of the competitors is kind of dialing back. And this is a big opportunity for Amazon. And I would say this is the number one threat to the trade desk's position in the market.
Are you in the middle of this, kind of DSP stuff with your business at Ampersand?
It's something that we're focusing on, building out programmatic, PMPs and PGs with the holding companies is something we're starting to do. Ultimately, it's the owner's inventory, but how do we do that? And right now we're looking to target, light TV viewers, folks that are harder to reach, things of that nature. But yes, it's something where we're definitely looking to go moving forward.
Okay, back to AI. We've got two interesting buy-side announcements I want to spend a couple minutes talking about. They both happened within, I think, 24 hours of each other. The first was, and Ari, this is all your category because they're names. They're cool new names. WPP Open Intelligence. So give us a 1 to 5 on the name.
The name 1, don't like it. Open Intelligence, very vague. What does open mean? Intelligence, anyone can own that word. I don't love it.
But what is it? It is an AI-powered marketing platform built around the first LMM,
Boo.
large marketing model.
Oh, no, do not create your new acronyms. Do not.
All right. You're tough. You're tough. Anyway, so what is Open Intelligence? It's a marketing platform. It uses, according to WPP, trillions of real-time signals and clients' first-party data to predict behavior and optimize campaigns, boosting performance while keeping data private and compliant. So, sounds like this is bringing forth a platform vision around InfoSum, some of the existing buying capabilities, and, all the data partnerships. They noted, I think, something like 300 data partners being part of this.
Yeah, I think what is good here is that WPP just did this rebrand where they got rid of the Group M name. And as part of that, they're repositioning the company as the leader among the holding co's in AI. And they probably are the leader among the holding co's in AI. They are investing more. And so by really leaning into that, they are potentially opening up a little differentiation wedge against their arch rivals. And that's very hard to do. So I think the overall marketing campaign is quite good, even if the specific branding may be a little bit off.
I think that's right. If we go back, last week we talked about the launch of WPP Media. It was very intentionally talked about, using AI, being AI first, had a great marketing campaign. This week, it's the launch of Open Intelligence. Presumably there'll be more to come at Cannes. So I think you're right. And, they're doing a good job of championing the future of WPP. I thought that what MIQ announced was actually pretty cool too. So MIQ announced Sigma. All right, give us your 1 to 5 on the Sigma name.
Okay, so let's do a little backstory here. Do we all agree on what a sigma is in slang?
Absolutely.
Okay, explain it to me. What's the difference between an alpha and a sigma in slang?
In Gen Z slang, to be
Gen
clear.
Z slang, yes.
To this middle-aged man's understanding of Gen Z slang, right?
Yes.
So alpha is, out there, chest beating, aggressive, talking a lot of smack, biggest personality in the room.
Yep.
Sigma is actually the one you got to worry about. He or she is quiet, executing, intrinsically motivated, and will catch up with you at the end of the day. This is my interpretation of alpha versus sigma.
Yeah, that was a really good explanation. What someone said, or I saw online, was that sigma is like John Wick. Right. Quiet and someone you have to worry about. Okay. So I think that is a good name. It's on the wave, man. This is a good name. Also, MIQ's reputation is a sigma. It's behind the scenes. They know what they're doing. They get shit done. They're not an agency of record. So the name fits the company also. So well done.
All right, we've got a thumbs up from the toughest naming critic in the industry, and it's interesting. It sounds a little bit like open intelligence, right? So I'll give you my kind of two sentences on it, right? AI powered ad platform that unifies programmatic and similar numbers, 300 data feeds, trillions of consumer signals, basically, is an end-to-end platform for planning, targeting, execution using multiple platforms. So, it's so interesting because you had Viant DSP happen out of nowhere last year. Then, as you observed, Ari, like a period of relative quiet from big platforms, but sounds like these big platforms were all building. And we're seeing the manifestation of it right now. And this thing seems pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I got actually a view of this a couple months ago at the MIQ client event that I attended. There's so much manual work, so much human intelligence involved in operating at a high efficiency and programmatic that making some of that AI generated makes a ton of sense. I think what's interesting if you look at Viant versus this is you really have to ask yourself, who are the client, who's using it, who's hands on keyboard using this AI, which might be different. Viant was sort of aiming at a mid-level agency person, maybe a smaller agency. Sigma, I think, is mostly intended for internal use, meaning the MIQ employees, because they're a full service shop. And obviously Zuck announcing things where, it's any mom and pop who wants to spend money. And they probably have different product attributes when you're looking at different audiences like that.
Yeah, well said. Feels like this is a big week that took the industry forward.
And the next story actually is on that topic too. It's for a different persona, like the Gigi thing.
Yeah. So Gigi, full disclosure, a portfolio company of my firms, they got their start as basically a buying and attribution platform for the Amazon streaming use case as a start, right? So basically, like they thought there was a real opportunity to do more using data for Amazon customers, and then we should actually kind of have Adam on. He's a pretty fascinating guy. He at one point got so AI pilled that he just was talking about it nonstop and, just like going deep in terms of the application for the business, and basically decided to like make a big bet on turning Gigi agentic. I didn't even put this one on the docket, but you did, which I think was interesting. All right, what did you see in Gigi that caught your attention?
Yeah, I think so. What is Gigi? What did they announce? It's a human avatar, a woman named Gigi, who helps you to run your campaigns. And I liked it for its innovative UI. The idea, like we were just talking 5 seconds ago about different audiences, different use cases. I can't help believe there's some group of advertisers who would really like to talk to a human or human-like person and organize their campaigns and get that feedback in a very soft, helpful way. I mean, account managers, this is what real human being account managers do at a lot of ad networks and agencies. Having it be AI-driven, I don't have a problem with, as long as it's disclosed. And I think I want to just give them a hat tip for innovation. I don't know if it'll work, but I love the idea.
And the other interesting thing is we hear so much about AI replacing agencies. What Gigi is doing is actually building a product for agencies. Like they're betting on the future being, like agencies are still going to have a really important role, but just empowering them with AI tools, which seems like a fresh approach. So super proud of Adam on this one. All right, we got a few more things here before we close it out. Talk about what happened. So the judge orders Google to turn over feasibility analysis of AdX and GAM spinouts, which apparently they've been talking about for a few years.
Yeah, so Google's legal strategy in some cases is just so laughable. So they have been saying that it's totally infeasible to spin out GAM. They've literally said it would like destroy the internet, which is come on, guys. And then they say, well, the analysis they've done internally, because of course they've done an analysis internally, like they'd be stupid not to. They can't disclose that because it's privileged, it's confidential, blah, blah, blah. And the judge had enough of it. And so the judge has ordered Google to turn over the judge said very specifically, written by non-lawyers, the analysis of the potential spin out. It's called, I think, Project Sunday and Project Monday. There's also something called Single Click, which is kind of funny because it was double click. And my guess is we won't actually see a lot of this. Will all be redacted to all hell, but it's really I would give my left foot to read these documents.
I bet, especially given the amount of time you've put into this. Anything else in the docket you want to talk about? You want to put them all in the newsletter?
Let's put them all in the newsletter. I do want to do a correction, though. Last week, we talked about Mountain and its IPO. And one of the points I made was that their definition of small business, SMB, is not exactly what they say it is. And I quoted my own self in my own newsletter saying that the average Mountain customer was $2 million. And then I read my own newsletter and I was wrong. It's actually an order of magnitude different. It's $200,000, which is really different. And some people quoted me on Twitter and I tried to correct them. So I apologize for getting my own fact wrong. It's still an interesting data point that their average customer is 200,000 because I think that's a lot bigger than some people would expect, but it's not 2 million. So I just want to set that straight.
Thank you. This has been fun. Thank you, Todd.
I appreciate it. Really enjoyed it today.
Yep. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Eric. And we will be back next week.
See you next week, everybody.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.